Welcome to the first Salute Your Sports of 2022. Boy, it feels good to say it, Tom. We made it to 2022. Exciting stuff. We started the show back up in 2020 during the pandemic. This, of course, is a reunion of our college radio sports show, which we did from 2010 to 2013. I think, Tom, you were a part of 2 of those 3 years. Drew Brackett, another one of our co-hosts who's out on vacation today. He was a part of that show. He's also a part of this show. So exciting to really kind of get our 3rd year of the show going. I know it's been just over an year total, but we've technically dipped our toes into did we start in 2021 or was it 2020? It was 21.
We started in 2020.
It was 2020. Okay, so I'm right. I'm accurate. So 3rd year of the show. We're going to have a good one today. We'll talk about the national title game in college football, some NFL matchups during the last week of the regular season, betting locks of the week, and much more.
Yeah, wishing Drew safe travels as he is on his way back home. And like you mentioned, a couple of firsts here as we start a 3rd calendar year of the show. It's our first week 18 in the NFL. So, of course, we're going to have stuff to talk about for that. But we will begin with arguably the biggest story going on in sports coming up. We have a rematch of the SEC championship game between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Looks like a pretty close game. We didn't have that luxury really with the 2 semifinal games. Cincinnati sticking close to Alabama for 3 quarters, or maybe it's just Alabama didn't pull away for 3 quarters, and then
the latter
of the game, that talent won out, and then Georgia perhaps reminding us that, just because we lost by a lot to Alabama in the SEC championship game, we're still from the SEC, and that matters. I think I definitely let myself get tripped up on that one, thinking Michigan had a decent shot. So we go into a rematch. It's going to be an interesting thing. Lots of storylines to play off of, but of course, the biggest one is probably quarterback play. We have on Alabama's side, Bryce Young. He is the Heisman winner versus Stetson Bennett, not Betson Stennett or Bennett Stetson. It doesn't matter. It's Stetson Bennett, the 4th. The question is he good enough to lead the Georgia Bulldogs to a national title over their long rivaled foe, the Alabama Crimson Tide?
Yeah, and the other talking point, by the way, is the coaches. I'll get into that a little bit later. I know I don't have it written down as a talking point, but that's the other big storyline. To say it in one word, and I know I'll have the stats. You know I like the stats. But, Tom, in one word, no, he's not good enough to win the national title for Georgia. There's a reason why he's a walk-on. There's a reason why he's not a big-time recruit. Entering this season, he had 10 career touchdowns and 7 career interceptions entering the season. He's had a pretty solid season, but that's because the team is so good. They've got a great offensive line. They've got great running backs, solid receivers, got a really good tight end, actually probably his best weapon. And it's easy to put up numbers when you play on a good team. I know, obviously, Bryce Young does the same too, but Bryce Young puts up way better numbers. Here's a fun fact about Stetson Bennett for you. He has 2 career 300-yard passing games. Coincidentally enough, it's the last 2 games. Against Alabama, he had to get to 300 pass yards. Why? Because they were down in the game. He had to throw the ball, and he put up over 300 yards, but it also threw a pick 6, had 2 interceptions in that game. And then against Michigan, he played really good, but I think Georgia's athletes were simply much better than Michigan's athletes. Outmatched Michigan was in that game. So I don't think he's good enough to win. I really do think, I know this is a cliche argument. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, but he's the reason why Georgia didn't beat Alabama the first time around, and he's probably the reason they're not going to beat him this time. I know John Mechie's a great receiver. Then the other guy, Williamson?
Jameson Williams.
Williams, that's what Jameson. See, that's how I got it mixed up. Jameson Williams is really good as well. So you can argue that Alabama does have better receivers, but overall, I think if you flip these 2 quarterbacks, I have a feeling that Georgia would win the national title over Alabama with Bryce Young starting against Bennett and Alabama if we flip the two players. But this is the modern day game. It's about the passing game. It's about the quarterback play, and that's what matters. And Stetson Bennett is not going to go to the NFL. He was not a 5-star recruit like Bryce Young was, and he is ultimately Georgia's downfall. He's not a bad quarterback. I have no problem saying that he's top 20 in college football. He is easily top 20 quarterback in college football. But to win the national title in the modern day game, you got to be a top 5 quarterback. Georgia's a top 5 football program. They don't have a top 5 quarterback. I think they were hoping that JT Daniels was going to be that, and he wasn't. So Bennett, I mean, that's the problem. Bennett isn't even considered the slam dunk number 1 guy on his own team, even though clearly the coaches like him and he's earned the right to be the starting quarterback in this game. But going into the season, he wasn't supposed to be the starter, and it's for a good reason. So I don't think he's good enough to win a national title. Can he? Yes. If things fall right, Alabama gets a turnover, get a couple bounces, a couple things go their way, it could happen. But in terms of generally year to year, that is not the guy you want leading your team. And Georgia is a pretty good running team, but they're not amazing at running. Like, they don't have Todd Gurley in the backfield. Their offense is not amazing. Like, if they had like a Heisman Trophy winning running back, then I would say, yes, he can do it. But they don't. They lean on their defense. And because of that, Alabama's going to put up points, and Bennett's not going to be able to hang. I don't think he's good enough in this game for me.
Yes, I definitely don't. I agree with you on all those points on, him not being necessarily a good enough quarterback to win a championship game. The question comes down to, does or how much does that matter? It's an issue of degree. We've seen that when Bryce Young does not play well, Alabama really sputters on offense, and as a whole, they're not as good of a team. And of course, he's a Heisman winner. He is the best player on the field. The thing is that basically Stetson Bennett just doesn't have to lose the game for Georgia. That's the luxury that he has over what Bryce Young has in terms of expectations and impact on the game. So if he doesn't throw a pick six, if he doesn't have, just 2 interceptions in general, give away 2 possessions, if he plays well enough to keep Georgia just on pace, doesn't have to extend himself, doesn't have to go over, I think the Bulldogs definitely have an opportunity to win, which I guess in definition would make him good enough to win a title. But I know what you're going with the nuance of this conversation. He doesn't have to be good enough for Georgia to beat Alabama. He has to be good enough for Georgia to not beat themselves, I think is the way I would put it best. Oddly enough, like, we're talking about Georgia coming into this game as if, they have this big mountain to overcome. They're considered 3-point favorites on a neutral site, which, given that they got their doors blown off just a few weeks ago, a 41-24 loss at the hands of Alabama, I don't necessarily know where that's coming in. I don't know if there's like a heavy, people are tired of Alabama bias going into the betting world on this one, or what the books have cooked up in a manner of speaking on this game. I will say one thing that is key: John Mechie out with a knee injury. So while Jameson Williams is the better of the 2 Alabama wide receivers, that's going to be something that could potentially play a role if Georgia is able to shade him a little bit more, maybe bracket him, keep a safety in deeper coverage on his side of the field at all times. That also could be a little bit of a difference for somebody else on Alabama to step up and beat you. There's a couple different ways, or there's a lot of different things Georgia has to do to win this game. I think Stetson Bennett just not being bad is as far as he needs to go, and the rest of the team, I think, is good enough to win the game. Absolutely.
I don't agree with that, actually, personally, just because I think we actually saw that he literally was playing without making mistakes early in the game, and he kept Georgia in the game. Once Alabama started dropping bombs and touchdowns, then he had to try to make a play. And when he did, that's when he threw the interceptions. I don't think that Georgia is good enough to stop Alabama, even without John Mechie. I mean, in that last game, Alabama had over 400 pass yards. I think it was the second most passing yards in an SEC title game. So as good as Georgia is on defense, they're not great against the pass. And I think they were very fortunate playing in the SEC East, which has a lot of really good running teams. You look at Tyler Beatty at Mizzou, phenomenal running back. You look at Kentucky, they're a running team. Tennessee is a good running team. All those teams have good defenses, really good teams in the SEC, but there really aren't very many good passing quarterbacks in the SEC East, especially. I mean, Bryce Young is the top dog in the SEC. He's the top passer, and he plays in the West. And Georgia wasn't really tested against that many good passing quarterbacks, and that I think is the one Achilles heel of their defense. I think their defensive linemen are so good, and we saw that in the Clemson game, the first game of the season. They were getting sack after sack after sack after sack, and they have really, really good defensive line play, and that in turn helps their secondary. But when they went up against a great passing team like Alabama, they struggled. So I actually think if these two teams play their absolute best, it goes down to probably a field goal. They are so close, so evenly matched. But I still think Alabama's best, even without John Mechie, is a little bit better than Georgia's best. I really do. I think Alabama is just a better team, and they match up better in this game. Obviously, it's a one-game scenario. They're not much better. They can easily lose this game. But if we're talking about the ceiling of the two teams, Alabama, I think, is a little bit better. And Stetson Bennett, I think, can't be a game manager. He has to play the game of his life if Georgia's going to win the national championship. That's my thought. And he could do it. He's playing better lately. He might prove me wrong. I wouldn't put it past him. But my gut feeling says that they won't win, and that'll be the problem.
Absolutely. Well, that also kind of comes into something you mentioned earlier that I know that you'll have plenty of evidence to back this up. But the coaching matchup, Nick Saban, of course, has this phenomenal record against his former assistant coaches. You know,
one loss ever.
How much does losing to Alabama maybe kind of sort of help Georgia a little bit in terms of they came into the SEC title game kind of just like as a presumptive favorite, being undefeated, steamrolling all these different teams, hit in the mouth. Does that actually kind of sort of help them in this game? Do they actually get to like look at the tape, see, okay, schematically, this is where we need to get better. This is what we need to do to change our game plan. Having seen Alabama just a couple of weeks ago, how much do you think that might play a role in this game?
Yeah, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the other question I have posed, so I'm kind of hit on both here. I think it almost washes out because I think it's easier to look at the tape and look at what you did wrong. And that's something that Georgia has the ability to do in this game. On the flip side of that, though, I would say Alabama is an underdog, and they're kind of playing with the chip on their shoulder, if you think about it, because one of the players I saw in the semifinal game, I can't remember what player it was, but he had done an interview and said that like he feels like the team's being disrespected. People are saying they're not as good as last year's team, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to win. So I think that in itself is going to give Alabama a little motivation. And I think Nick Saban's going to have his team prepared. So any little bit of edge that Georgia might get from having played in this game and having seen the tape, I think Alabama's going to get it on the other end, being the underdog. I think both of these coaches are great. They'll have their teams prepared. Obviously, it's mentor versus mentee. Nick Saban is 4-0 against Kirby Smart. Alabama has won 7 straight against Georgia. I don't think Saban has lost against them as a head coach. Maybe very early in his career. I think since 2007, I believe, was the last time that Georgia beat Alabama. So 2007. It's been a while. So and it's interesting when you think about that, though. Like, does that stat matter or not? Because this is obviously a lot of those players have not played. A lot of those guys who have been losing those runs, they don't play on the same team. So I don't know how much that necessarily matters, but I do think Alabama just seems to have Georgia's number, and they have everyone's number, and that's kind of Georgia's next step. I mean, that was the whole step for Michigan. Like, Michigan had to get by Ohio State. They did. Georgia has to get by Alabama. And I do think Kirby Smart is great. I do think Nick Saban, he was the head coach there. That's his assistant. He knows him a little bit better. I think in a game where it's close talent level, I do think having the best coach and the best quarterback, which is two things Alabama both have, that does go a long way to me. So I think Georgia having lost that game could help them a little bit, but I don't think it's significant. I think Alabama has their own motivating factors. Pretty wild to think about that Alabama beat Georgia by 17 in the SEC title game, and they're an underdog. And the other thing that I'll say, Tom, is you mentioned when Bryce Young doesn't play well, Alabama struggles. That was the case for much of the year, but down the stretch, their defense has looked much better. They played great against Auburn. They played great against Cincinnati. And their running game, they had their running back went over 200 yards against Cincinnati. So it seems like Alabama's improving defensively and improving in the running game, because Bryce Young was actually not great in the college football semi. He had he had like 3 touchdown passes, but he barely went over 200 yards. He had an interception. So by most guys' standards, he was decent, but by his standards, quite frankly, he played an off game, and that's why Alabama didn't pull ahead until the fourth quarter. And that, I think, was very important for Alabama because they showed people that they can still win the old school Alabama way, which is running the ball and playing defense. And this. Just both of these teams have a lot of young players, and sometimes it takes young players a little bit of time to get going. It seems like those Alabama defensive players and the Alabama running backs, Alabama offensive line, it seems like they've all settled in later in the season. So I like Alabama in this game.
Yeah, well, in terms of making a pick, me, I'm anti-dynasty as far as things go. I typically don't cheer for Lakers or Yankees. I like a little more parity. So, it's really tough to call the game. It's just like a straight out winner. So I'm going to go with heart on this one and say I'd like Georgia to win, so I'll pick them. But I think it's absolutely a coin flip game as far as wagering goes. And perhaps it'll get touched on later on in the program, not by me, but
it will.
There could be some action. I would actually have this as a straight up pick 'em game. But if you want to try to grab 3 points because you like Alabama or get a little plus on the money line, I don't think you'd be off for saying so. I think it's going to be really, really tight, which is going to be a lot of fun to watch on Monday night.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to be. I'm going Alabama, but I'm not like insanely confident. I do think it could go. I think it could go either way. I think it's kind of like that Ohio State Clemson game last year in the semis. Like everyone was going Clemson, but you knew Ohio State had the talent to win, and they did. This is going to be a similar case to that. I think it's going to be a close game. I think this won't be a double-digit win like last time. And then sure enough, I say it, it'll be Georgia by double digits. My predictions.
I don't think so.
But haven't been spot on. But neither has anyone's predictions. Like, it's crazy how many upsets we had in college football, NFL football. It's just mind-blowing, the 2021 we had, and it certainly carried into 2022. If past national title games are any indication, I mean, you looked at Baylor as the underdog, beat Gonzaga in men's hoops. We had the underdog Bucks beat the Suns in the NBA Finals. Both of those teams underdogs, just making it. We had the Bucks beat the Chiefs as underdogs. We had Chelsea over Man City in the Champions League. Argentina over Brazil in the Copa America. The Euro Cup, Italy was maybe like third, fourth, fifth favorite going into the tournament. Yeah. They certainly weren't the favorite entering the tournament. So this has been the year of the upsets. You know it, Tom, because you're the fantasy football champ as the 3 seed without Derrick Henry. Go get him, Tom Castleman, fantasy football king in the house. So
I might have to look up, but I'm pretty sure I have the most roster moves made by like a long shot.
There you go.
I was duct taping. Like we have, for those who listen and don't know, we have a notoriously short league. It's 8 teams.
Sure.
So there's plenty of talent to be had. And still by the end, I'm looking at my roster. I'm relying on Jamar Chase's 55-point week to get me the win.
That's why you won.
Oh man, it was been a year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was wild, and you got a ton of points. Actually, Alec did pretty good. He had 183 points in the final, which in a typical week that gets you a win. You had 197. I think it was the third or fourth most points scored the entire season in a single week fantasy matchup. It is PPR. We do have 2 quarterbacks, but I know sometimes like 197 points for a 1 week. Some people do 2-week
Mhm.
championships. That's a whole bunch, Tom. You earned it. First
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, I think
First
this might be
place.
the first time I've won our league. Usually
I
it's
think so.
been Jerry. I think there's a
Jerry didn't
couple other
even make the
people
playoffs.
did not know, which I was grateful.
Yeah. Well, and it was upsets too. Allie was the 3 seed. She beat the Drew. Beat
Mhm.
Drew as the 2 in the semis or the consolation ladder.
Yep.
I was true to seeding. I got 6th in the regular season, 6th in the playoffs. I added it up, by the way,
Mhm.
with my late season run and my points. I finished, I believe, 6th in total points as well. So I
Oh,
was
not
just
bad.
about 6th out of 8. My position was very fair.
Well earned.
I will say this again. Obviously, I'm not going to spend too much time into it, but I did have Leonard Fournette, George Kittle making late season runs. I think if Kittle was healthier this season,
Mhm.
if things had gone differently, I could have snuck
Yeah.
into the playoffs. Once you sneak in, you can
Make a little
win.
noise.
You did it
I
yourself.
I limped in and made a lot of noise,
That's right.
upsetting Drew and Alec, which I know that he's like had his shares of travails in fantasy
First ever
football. So,
time he's ever made the playoffs in fantasy football. He's been in our league
well,
maybe
that's
4 or
good.
5 times. He's done fantasy a few other times. I'm not sure the exact number, but he's been in fantasy most years in the last 10 years, never made the playoffs. First time
Second
making the
place isn't
playoffs,
bad. Yeah,
got himself second place. So pretty good. Anyways,
absolutely.
so national title game next Monday. Monday
Mhm.
night, we'll have a show, I believe, Tuesday next week. We'll recap it all. You're picking Alabama, or I'm picking Alabama. You're
I'm
taking
going Georgia.
Georgia. I
Don't know
think
what Drew would be
I didn't
doing.
even ask. I should have asked him, but I'm sure Drew would go Georgia, knowing Drew.
Probably
Just
just to
because,
be contrarian.
well, to be contrarian to me. So it'll be good, though. It'll be a fun national title game, all SEC matchup. And I'll say this before I will move on to the NFL. The SEC is top dog for a reason. And every time bowl season comes around, which, by the way, the SEC in the last 5 years has the best record, counting the regular and postseason, of any other conference against other opponents. So they do have the best record against non-conference matchups. So the statistics are there that prove the SEC is the best. But any year where the SEC starts getting bowl losses, everyone says, "Oh, the SEC is overrated." Well, the
Mhm.
SEC started, I believe, 0-3 in bowl games, and now they're roughly 500, and they've got 2 teams in the title game. They lost the non-important bowl games, like Mizzou losing to Army. Mizzou was without Tyler Beatty. He was
Mhm.
literally their whole offense. You think if Tyler Beatty played in that game, Army was going to win that bowl game? I don't think so. At Florida, I'm not exactly sure who sat out for Florida, but you had to know someone was sitting out.
Mhm.
And they lost their head coach too. So if
Yep.
Florida put their best foot forward, I'm sure they would have beaten Central Florida as well. So don't underestimate the SEC. The SEC is top dog for a reason. The SEC has the national championship game yet again, all SEC showdown. Last time it was all SEC was Alabama, Georgia, and it was little known freshman Tua coming in the second half to carry the load, get the upset, throw into a certain Devontae Smith, who was
Mhm.
also a freshman at the time before he was established as a star. It was Tua to Smith for the game-winning touchdown. Alabama winning in overtime, getting that comeback win. Expect for a similar game in this one, and that's what started it. Tua was really that first time where Nick Saban said, "I'm going to get the top recruit at quarterback." He went out and got a 5-star, whether number 1, number 2, I don't remember what he was ranked, but he was
Mhm.
definitely one of the top few quarterbacks, as is Bryce Young. And that's the trend we'll continue to see in years to come. I'll say one more thing about the bowl season. Wildly impressed with CJ Stroud. I watched that game against Utah. He delivered some absolute dimes. I do think the team that was best suited to beat Alabama is Ohio State. I think Alabama would still beat them because Bama has a better defense.
Mhm.
But Ohio State has the offense to keep up with Alabama. That would have been quite a game if Ohio State didn't lay an egg against Michigan. Because I do think, Tom, I'm being completely honest with you. I think Ohio State, we're talking about getting the best out of your team, to me, are either the second or third best team in the country if they're playing how they can. It's
Mhm.
Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia, I think, are the three. And Ohio State just happened to lay an egg. And how about Notre Dame, by the way? 0-10 in its last 10 major bowl games. Only 2 more bowl wins than Mizzou. They laid an egg. They had the big lead, 28-7, and they choked.
Yeah, but not on that note, not a bad start for Marcus Freeman coming in kind of like shorthanded in terms of taking over from
He's a
Brian
young
Kelly.
guy.
Yeah, I think he's only like 38, something like that. I think, Notre Dame could be trending in the right direction. A lot of people in South Bend, including the players, and that's the most important thing, really, really like him. So it'll be interesting to see if Notre Dame next season can kind of reverse that trend a little bit.
They won't. They might get the 4 seed and lose by 30. So we'll see. I don't
At
see
least they're
them
playing,
reversing it.
It depends on what bowl game they get, absolutely. But in terms of one and dones, we actually have some of those in the NFL starting up this week. Probably the most clear cut, or one of the most clear cut playoff scenarios. We have Raiders, we have Chargers playing each other in the last game of the season. So it kind of comes down to who makes the playoffs. This is the team that lost their head coach halfway through the season. Is it going to be the franchise that's been traditionally down? They've had up and downs throughout their seasons, but typically kind of flame out toward the end of the year. Who do you like in this game?
Yeah, one final thing to say about the NFL playoffs as a whole, and there's a whole bunch of teams that will finish either 500, 1 game over, or 1 game under, now that they were doing the 17-game season. But we had, going into last week, something like 26 of 32 teams with a shot to make the playoffs. Whole bunch of them got knocked out. Actually, in the AFC, we have the Colts, Chargers, Raiders, Steelers, and Ravens. 5 teams for the final 2 playoff spots, but the Ravens and Steelers, who play each other, by the way, need beyond a miracle. They both need so many things to go their way. And for sure, Chargers and Raiders, winner is in, loser is out. I think the Colts play the Jaguars, don't they?
Yes.
So the Colts play the Jaguars. I don't think the Colts will have any issues winning that game. So the Colts win, and they're in. So the Colts will be in, and that last playoff spot is going to go down to the winner of the Chargers and Raiders. The Jaguars just lost 50-10, by the way. They've got the number 1 pick locked up. They have no coach. It's a mess. Indianapolis will not lose to Jacksonville. It's a crazy year of upsets. Jacksonville did beat the Bills this year, but it's just not going to happen.
No.
Colts, by the way, losing for the first time this year last week when Jonathan Taylor went over 100 rush yards. Granted, he just went just over, but they did lose to the Raiders. Who do you like in this Chiefs, or not Chiefs, Raiders-Chargers game? I think this is a classic game of 2 teams that probably consistently underachieve a little bit, 2 teams that consistently choke, and this is a game where something's got to give, because one of those choke teams, well, they could both choke, and someone could give the game away, but in theory, one of them is going to come up big in this moment, and one of them is going to make the playoffs. I mean, who do you like in this game?
Well, you were kind of saying it about the college football championship. I think that the Chargers have a better coach in Brandon Staley, and they absolutely have the better quarterback in Justin Herbert. I like the Chargers kind of ascending a little bit to make it into the playoffs. I don't know how much noise they're going to make once they get there, but Justin Herbert certainly has the weapons at his disposal to do a little bit of damage. It really comes down to a defense that has a lot of individual talent, because you've got Joey Bosa on the edge, Derwin James is a great safety. There's a lot of talented individual guys, but for whatever reason, as a whole, the defense hasn't really been able to put it together, and that's going to be really their biggest weakness in this game. I think, though, that I'm liking Justin Herbert to kind of make that a moot point almost, keeping the Chargers well enough ahead that it's going to force the Raiders to have to throw the ball a lot, get away from more of that running game that they like to do with Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs. So, give me the Chargers in this one.
Yeah, on paper, Chargers should win, so I'll pick the Chargers. They won by 14 earlier this season They've got a plus 18 point differential. The Raiders have a minus 68 point differential,
And yet
and
they're
they're
here.
still 9-7, and they're here. And I'll say this: Justin Herbert is the better quarterback, but Derek Carr, I venture to say this, and this may be true. He may be the most inconsistent player in the history of the National Football League. And when Derek Carr is playing at his best, he is a top 5 quarterback. He is on par with Justin Herbert. He throws a beautiful ball. He's a great leader. He's just inconsistent. His accuracy isn't always there. His decision-making isn't always there. But his pure arm strength and his ability as a player is impressive. So if we get the Derek Carr, like 2.0, like the best Derek Carr, it's almost a wash at that quarterback position because he's got a lot of talent. I am going to pick the Chargers just because I do like you said, you kind of said it for me. Better coach, better quarterback. So give me the Chargers, but I do think this game has potential to surprise us. I mean, the Raiders surprised us last week. They weren't supposed to go in Indianapolis and beat the Colts. That was supposed to be
the
the
hottest
Colts
team in the
clinching a
NFL.
playoff
Yeah.
spot. Yeah, the Colts were red hot going into that game. They've been beating everyone around. Just ask the Cardinals, ask the Patriots, playoff teams that the Colts, quite frankly, dominated. And the Colts got a Hail Mary touchdown to end the half, and they still lost the game. The Raiders flat out outplayed them. So I'm not putting anything past the Raiders. I am picking the Chargers because we got to make a pick. But this game definitely could go either way.
Absolutely. And over on the NFC side, the picture is considerably more clear cut. You have the 49ers facing off with the Rams. And then the other playoff matchups that have some consequences, the New Orleans Saints playing the Falcons. And then as far as kind of divisional shuffling goes, you have the Cardinals and the Seahawks. So we could see a little bit of jockeying for position in terms of who wins the NFC West, whether it's the Rams or Cardinals based on those outcomes. But in terms of just making it in, it is down to 2 teams for 1 spot, 49ers and the Saints. If 49ers win, they're in. If the Saints win, they're in on tiebreakers. So who do you like in this one, Comment?
Absolute toss-up. It really is. Just because you got to factor this in. And I don't know if there's an injury update on Jimmy Garoppolo. That's something I meant to look up and didn't. Maybe while I'm talking, you can look that up. I'm not sure if he's going to play or not. But regardless, the 49ers own the Rams, by the way, Tom. They've got 5 straight wins against the Rams, including a 31-10 win earlier this season. They're a really good team matchup-wise. That game is a total toss-up, 50-50. If I had to pick it, I actually would pick the Niners. And I'm going to pick the Niners to make the playoffs just because the Saints need 2 things to happen. I think New Orleans is a favorite against the Falcons. The 49ers are an underdog against the Rams. But the Saints are reeling. They've got a lot of injuries. Their offense looks atrocious right now. They had lost a couple games in a row. They just beat the Panthers, but the Panthers right now look like arguably the second worst team in the league at the moment. So I wouldn't read too much into that win. And the Falcons are a division rival. Atlanta would love nothing more than to go in and beat New Orleans and knock them out of the playoffs. You better believe it.
Oh, yeah.
So I look at that like I give the Saints about a 55% chance to win. I give the 49ers realistically about a 50-50 shot to win. So anything could happen, but I'm going to stick with the Niners just because the Saints have to have 2 things go their way. 49ers could lose and still get in. And I think they're just really good against the Rams. There's something about the matchups of those 2 teams. You know this, like matchups do matter. And I don't know specifically what it is that they have that the Rams simply can't seem to beat. But they haven't been able to do it. And of course, this year it's like throw the statistics out the window. Like the Ravens have the worst secondary in the NFL. They should have, without Lamar Jackson, they should have lost the spread against the Packers and the Rams, and they lost by 1 point in both of those games. So my statistics this year are more useless than any year before because it's a crazy year. But it just, I'll stick with the statistics one more time because that's what I know. And if anything, it's the year of the upset. So maybe forget about the statistics. Just know that the Niners will get the upset because it's the year of the upset. So I'll go with San Fran to make the playoffs. But it definitely could be New Orleans. It'll be pretty wide open. But I do think Cowboys Cardinals likely to get a rematch, regardless of what happens. I mean, obviously, I think if the Cardinals win, the Rams lose, that could flip. But
Yeah.
potential for a rematch in that Cowboys Cardinals game. So we'll see. Who do you like to get that last playoff spot?
Well, I mean, the 49ers are the better team. So I do like them getting that last playoff spot more than I like the Saints. I do think that the Falcons absolutely could win outright, and then San Fran can just kind of backdoor in either way to make the playoffs. As a Bears fan, I know a little something about that from last year, where you lose and are still in. So yeah, it's really kind of tough to judge these teams because going into this, it's like the Saints realistically should not be a playoff team. Like they're almost like the picture definition for why there shouldn't be a seventh playoff spot and only one bye, as to the more traditional 2-bye 6-team model that's set up, is because they're going to be sputtering in to the playoffs with their third or fourth quarterback.
And they'll make a run. They'll make a run. Of course, 2021.
This is all going to come back. This is all going to come back on me. But no, I could absolutely see the Falcons, doing the Saints a little dirty, and winning that game outright. So yeah, I like the 49ers better than the Saints.
Yeah, a couple other NFL notes before we move on to locks of the week. Didn't actually have this in the rundown because I made the rundown before the game, but Monday Night Football looked like Ben Roethlisberger's last game ever in Pittsburgh, going out with the win. That was a big moment for him. Another takeaway from that game, Tom, lock-up defensive player of the year we talked about earlier. Let's give it to TJ Watt. Dude had 4 sacks. He's now 1 sack away from tying Michael Strahan's record, and I think he's going to get it the last game of the season against the Ravens. TJ Watt is an absolute animal. And one other Pittsburgh note, Mike Tomlin, I believe, became the first coach in the history of the National Football League to go 15 seasons without a single losing season. He's never had a losing record as a head coach. Mike Tomlin, grossly underrated as a coach. Pittsburgh has had injuries this year. Juju Smith-Schuster's out. I think even TJ Watt might have missed a game or two, and he still has all those sacks. Ben Roethlisberger missed literally, even though Ben is past his prime, if Ben Roethlisberger plays against the Lions, think about this. The Steelers tied the Lions. Had they not tied the Lions with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, who's not good, Big Ben is still better than Mason Rudolph, they would be in the playoffs with the win next week. They would be a playoff team. So the tie against the Lions cost the Steelers a playoff spot.
Yeah, no, it's
at home. Think about that.
Absolutely incredible. I had that for a salute later on in the show, but more than happy to get that out of the way now. It is the picture. It's the model picture of why you shouldn't necessarily, when you're looking for head coaches, listen up, Bears, that you shouldn't necessarily go with like the super trendy, like, okay, who's a great offensive mind or who's a guru of this or that. Mike Tomlin does come from a more defense-oriented background, but the thing that separates him, and is it Art Rooney? It's one of the Rooneys. That's the family that owns the Pittsburgh Steelers, actually wrote a book on their father's process for finding and hiring, front office people, coaches, everything, and why they went with Mike Tomlin, even though he wasn't necessarily like a super hot, trendy candidate at the time. And it's because as head coach of a football team, sure, you have your influences, offense and defense, but that's not nearly as important as your leadership, as your ability to manage egos and everything. You're not coaching one side of the ball or the other. And that's kind of been what's in vogue as far as hiring coaches go, whether that's, this person's an expert from the Andy Reid tree or what have you. You need to be able to lead people. And Mike Tomlin's ability to be at least average, at least mediocre for 15 years. Also, it's been 15 years.
It's a
Like, it
long
doesn't
time.
feel like he's been coaching for 15 years. He's, which just kind of goes to like the Steelers taking a gamble on a younger guy and it paying off. And sure, they've like only won one Super Bowl, but they've been, in the
He's a
hunt.
Hall of Famer. He
Oh,
retires tomorrow. I
easily,
put him in the Hall of Fame. No
easily.
problem.
He doesn't even have to retire for me, and he's in the Hall of Fame. Put him in today. I know that's not how the rules work, but put him in today. Give him a
Sure.
gold jacket, black and gold jacket there. So
Like
yeah,
the
just
Steeler colors.
an incredible career that he's had so far, and we don't even know like what his second or third act might be as he continues to go through coaching. As long as he wants to go through coaching, he's just an outstanding leader, and you see that through how the organization, how the players keep playing for him, even in seasons where it's clear they're not going to win the division, make the playoffs, but they still get to being at least average at the end of a year. And of course, in a 17 game season with that tie, still sews up no matter what, being a 500 team now that those no longer exist without ties.
Yeah, and that's what's so funny that they can still finish 500.
Yes, absolutely.
Despite the tie. So
absolutely.
I do think they're going to win against the Ravens, actually, personally. I don't know what the Lamar Jackson situation is. I have a feeling Pittsburgh wins the last week. A couple other real quick things to hit on in the NFL. They both surround that division. I also hit on Ben Roethlisberger. I know some questionable things he's done off the field, so it makes it harder for me to cheer for him. But on the field, one of the all-time greats. Set all sorts of Steeler records and had a phenomenal career for Pittsburgh. Probably a top 10 quarterback of all time. I know, at the time of retirement, maybe. I think there's probably half a dozen guys in this generation alone who can pass him up. So maybe say top 10 at time of retirement, and then maybe top 20 by the time, some of these guys get done. But Big Ben's had a great career, really consistent, really, really good player. Got to give him some props for what he did on the field, because does this look like it's going to be his last game next week against the Ravens? So we'll see that. And then the other big note is that the Bengals. How about them Bengals? Joe Burrow, over 400 yards, 4 touchdown passes, back-to-back weeks over 400 yards. Jamar Chase, we talked about him earlier. I think, was it 266 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns? Jamar Chase alone had more yards than Patrick Mahomes had passing. Jamar Chase's receiving yards. Joe Burrow now is 5th in the league in passing yards, right ahead of Mahomes. And Burrow is also 6th in touchdowns, although he's only 1 touchdown back from being tied for 3rd. Actually, Rodgers, Mahomes, and Herbert all have 35 touchdown passes. Burrow and Josh Allen have 34. And Jamar Chase, after that great game, 4th in the league in receiving yards. Justin Jefferson is 2nd. Those 2 Tiger teammates who Joe Burrow threw the ball to at LSU are top 4 in receiving yards. LSU is breeding ground for top receivers. Odell Beckham Jr. when he was healthy. Jarvis Landry, another LSU Tiger. So really, really big things Joe Burrow is doing right now. I know we talked about this last week. Like, will the Bengals break that playoff drought? The 30-year playoff drought without a win. They've made the playoffs, haven't won. And I know last week I was saying, probably not. I'm kind of thinking maybe so, because that was a statement win over the Chiefs, 34-31. They quite frankly almost messed up the game at the end of the game with some of their decision-making, but they were aggressive, and they beat the Chiefs at their own game. It was a shootout, like you said it would be, and I thought it would be a shootout as well. I probably had it pretty much Chiefs winning by a field goal. Instead, it was the Bengals winning by a field goal, and they were down 28-17 at half, 21-7 at one point. They just never gave up, kept battling, and they got themselves a division crown. And the Bengals, they're the real deal. And that division, they're going to be the real deal for a long time to come. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, they could be the next Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison. That duo is that good.
Well, hopefully they will have a better defense to pair with that than the Colts were able to provide over the course of Peyton Manning's career. Yeah, definitely, it's a tough division. It'll be really interesting to see how things play out. Especially as Ravens always pretty solid. Saints or not Saints, Steelers as well, as they kind of figure out what life is like post Big Ben. So definitely some fascinating stuff further on down the line. But playoffs right around the corner. We talked about the AFC fairly extensively. We touched a little bit on NFC, but now we're kind of getting into a team that we haven't talked about so far this week, but they are the top team in the NFC,
The
top team in
NFL.
the NFL currently. The
Sure.
Green Bay Packers are on the road facing the aforementioned, ruining the Steelers' chances of making into the playoffs, Detroit Lions with that tie. The Packers with Aaron Rodgers are the only team that is currently sewn up the number one seed and the only bye week in the playoffs in this current format, which kind of leads to the question of what do they do from a personnel standpoint heading into this last game of the season. The Packers cannot improve on their playoff position regardless of record. Lions, not that great of a team. They're not really playing for anything either. So how do you think the Packers should handle things? Should they go full bore like they do every other week? Do they go more of a preseason model? Do they just not even bother suiting some guys up? Where are you standing on all this?
Well, you probably know where I stand on this. Same as the
Mm-hmm.
college football playoff, or players, not playoff, players sitting out bowl games. I want to see them play. I think it builds rhythm. I actually think the Chiefs sitting out their guys last year when they had the bye hurt them in the playoffs, didn't give them rhythm going into the playoffs. I remember when I think who was the coach after Tony Dungy? I'm blanking on the Colts
Was it
coach.
Jim Caldwell?
Jim Caldwell. Yeah, it was Jim
Yeah.
Caldwell. They had a year where they were like going for an undefeated season and they, started resting guys late in the season. Didn't work for them in the playoffs. I think there's just a lot of examples of where teams rest their guys. I mean, think about this. They're already going to be resting next week. So I know they're going to get a bye. So it's just 3 weeks of rust. I think rust is a bigger issue to me than rest. I think the NFL game is played at a very high level. I know Aaron Rodgers is a great player, but even Aaron Rodgers, he's a human being. You saw how bad he played week one of the season. I know a little different scenario. He
Mm.
hadn't played at all, and it was week one. He's played multiple games. And then he had the one game where he missed, sat out due to COVID, and his first game back after COVID also wasn't as good. So it leads me to believe that Aaron Rodgers himself is a guy that prefers to have the rhythm of playing in the games, especially since he hasn't even practiced that much. He's been banged up with that toe, and I know that's what you're going to say. Oh, he's already got an injury, but it's not one of those injuries that seems to be getting worse during the games. It's not an injury that it can really, I mean, you could re-aggravate any injury technically. I do think that they should play some of the game to have rhythm. Now, they get up 2 touchdowns at halftime. You can maybe have him sit down the second half. I'm not saying that he needs to be playing when it's 28-0, but I do think I would like to see them play at least in the first half to get some momentum and to have some camaraderie going into the playoffs because you can get hurt in practice. We've seen guys get hurt in practice. Obviously, better chance to get hurt in the games, but there have been season-ending injuries in practice as well. You can get hurt any which way. So I don't like the idea of playing scared. I think the Packers want to get that win, and they want to be ready for the playoffs and be in as good of a position and playing as good a football as they possibly can. Yeah, I would play the starters at least the first half,
Yeah.
and then maybe if it's a blowout, maybe you take them out early. Maybe be a little cautious. Maybe call a few shorter plays. Try not to get him into trouble. But I think he needs to play.
Yeah, I think the truth kind of lies somewhere in the middle. I mean, if you're going from like a risk management perspective, are the Packers more likely to lose because they weren't in rhythm and not playing the Lions, or are they more likely to lose? Devontae Adams turns an ankle and is out for a couple of weeks. Aaron Jones re-aggravates a knee injury, is out for a couple of weeks. Aaron Rodgers with the toe. That I think is more likely to have an impact on how far they go in the playoffs. I think it's more correlational than causational the extra weeks of rest. Like, it's easy to point at that and say, hey, they sat out starters and that's why they lost later on in the playoffs. It's one of those things we'll never know. It's like, oh, Patrick Mahomes is great because he sat all year. It's like, well, also maybe the Chiefs could have won the Super Bowl that year had they played him from the beginning.
They could have.
That's
one thing I like to say, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's just one of those things where it's just like, I don't necessarily buy into like they have to play the game in order to be in rhythm, because if they're not, that's the reason why they'll lose in the playoffs. I don't think that's necessarily true. And the other thing is, I mean, you have Jordan Love, who's going to be your quarterback of the future. I mean, we saw a little bit of fool's gold. Was it like literally a decade ago with Matt Flynn putting up like 450 something yards, got himself a tidy little contract from the Seattle Seahawks
the Lions, I think,
against
last week
the
of the
Lions.
season.
Absolutely, that's where I was going with that. But Jordan Love is the QB of the future. Do you want to give him a full week of reps? You've got AJ Dillon, a younger running back. Like, you can still rest starters and still come out and win this game. That's how good the Packers are with their skill position guys and how bad the Lions are in general. I think going for a preseason model, like a week 3 of the preseason, is perfectly acceptable. You get all the starters out there, they pop the pads a little bit. They run a relatively vanilla offense. You don't want to give anything away. And then second half, turn it over to the backups and everything. That's probably where they'll end up going. But I could, easily see them defending the position of, we've locked everything up. We want to see what Jordan Love has, and kind of spin it a little bit differently of like, no, we're not playing scared. We're thinking longer term. I could see it going either ways. I'd probably split it right down the middle, though.
I have a couple things to add to that, and a couple things on the Packers. I think the Packers are looking at this season as almost like a Super Bowl or bust type season, because this sets up for them to be the best opportunity to win the Super Bowl. I know they had home field last year, but you take a look at the home field this year. This is potentially Aaron Rodgers' last year in Green Bay. We don't know. Maybe he comes back again. Maybe he doesn't. You never know. But it could be his last season. They've got the home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Who are the other teams in contention this year? They are all warm weather or dome teams. You've got the Cowboys are a dome team. The Cardinals are a dome warm weather team. The Saints, if they make it, are a dome team. The 49ers are a warm weather team. You've got the Rams are a warm weather team. You've got the Bucks are a warm weather team. The only other team in the NFL that really is used to playing in the cold temperature is the Eagles. And the Eagles, quite frankly, are the worst. I mean, honestly, they are the worst team in the playoffs. Of any team that will be in the playoffs. I mean, obviously, if the Saints sneak in, you can argue because the Saints have injuries, maybe the Eagles are a little bit better. But on paper, at full strength, given personnel and coaches and young players, et cetera, the Eagles are the worst team in the playoffs. And that's the only team in that conference that is, in theory, a cold weather team. Now, I think Tom Brady has shown that he can win in the cold. He showed it last year against Green Bay. So it's not by any means a given. And I'll say this too. I actually think Green Bay isn't as great as, I don't know. They're a team that I think overachieves a lot because Rodgers raises their level. Because we saw them against the Chiefs. Granted, it was the Chiefs. The Chiefs' defense is much better, but they couldn't move the ball against the Chiefs. And part of that could be Jordan Love. I know it was his first career start, but I think they put up, 7 points in that game. I don't know what they're going to do without Aaron Rodgers. I'll say this too. Maybe it's kind of a fluke, but I believe they're undefeated in games that Devontae Adams doesn't play, which is one of the crazy sports statistics over the last few years. But this is kind of could be a last stand for the Packers, because wherever Rodgers goes, Adams could follow, if not right away, possibly soon. They've got a great relationship. And I actually can, we're talking about the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, I take Devontae Adams with me, maybe, heck, even if without him. They've got Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, who'll be back from injury, Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth, and Najee Harris. They've got TJ Watt on the defense, Mike Tomlin as head coach. Pittsburgh could be a great destination for Aaron Rodgers to go go over there in Pittsburgh and win a Super Bowl, quite possibly. So it is wild to think about this, though. Brett Favre was one of top 2 or 3 guy his entire career, if not at times the best quarterback in the league when he played. Aaron Rodgers has been top 2 or 3, if not the best quarterback in the league in every season he's played. With those 2 guys, they only have 2 Super Bowl wins. And one of those with Rodgers was actually when they were a 6 seed. Talk about rhythm and momentum. They won it all as a 6 seed. So getting that 1 seed and getting all those buys hasn't really helped them that much in the past. I mean, they were the 1 seed and played in the NFC title game last year and lost. They played in the NFC title game the year before and lost. That seemed to be sort of their ceiling, with the exception of that one magical season run they had. Because, I mean, they had a season where they were 15-1 and they lost to the Giants, I believe, like their first playoff game. So I don't know. We'll see what happens in Green Bay. It'll be interesting to watch.
I won't shed a tear if that happens.
What?
I won't be shedding any tears if that happens.
No, I won't be either. Here's what I'm nervous about. I said this at work, on my podcast at work for our sports memorabilia job. I'm so afraid of having a rematch and seeing Brady and Rodgers again, and I'm upset at no matter what happens. That's like my worst case NFC Championship game. And you know what? Who are the 2 guys and teams that I trust to get there? Sadly, it's the Packers and Bucks. It's a year of upsets. Anything can happen, and I sure hope it does. But I have a feeling that we might be seeing that rematch, and probably will go the Bucks' way again. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they won in Green Bay last year as well in the cold weather, as you mentioned.
Sure.
So, it'll be fascinating to see how this last week plays out, who's positioned where. And, of course, next week, after talking the college football championship, we'll be getting right into all those juicy playoff matchups. It's going to be an absolutely loaded show next week. So cannot wait for that. Now we move into locks of the week, I believe, where on average the show did really well.
I brought us down. We'll give a salute to Drew Brackett. He went 5-0 with his picks last week. Drew Brackett absolutely on fire. He had the Bengals covering 5.5 against the Chiefs. Bengals winning 34-31. He had Las Vegas plus 2.5 against the Colts. That was before that line moved a lot. Carson Wentz wasn't going to play. Then Carson Wentz came back. But Drew actually had that line still worse than the closing line and won it anyways because the Raiders won outright. He had the Pats minus 15.5 against the Jags. Pats winning 50-10. That's one that I was looking at. Should have put in, quite honestly. You had that one as well. Jaguars, no motivation left. Bears -6 over the Giants. The Bears winning 29-3, and he had Saints -7 over the Panthers. His only close one, 38 or 18-10 Saints. The rest of them, they weren't even close. He picked 2 underdogs in the Bengals and Raiders. They won outright. He had the Pats by 16. They won by 40. Had the Bears by 6. They won by 26. It was a really, really good week for Mr. Brackett. Tom, you did pretty well yourself. You were 4-1. You also had the Pats. You had the Steelers +3 against the Browns. Steelers winning outright. That's another one that I was looking at. 2 of the ones I was looking at and stayed away from ended up being L's. So should have gone with both of those. And probably should have gone with this one, too. I thought this was a good pick. Bengals Chiefs over 50. It was 65 points. Cowboys Cardinals over 51.5. That's the only one you missed at 47. And you had, well, how about this one? Bills over 28.5 against the Falcons. Bills at 29 points. All right, Tom. Living on the edge of your seat there. I was 1-4. Not a good week. Actually, I actually thought I was 0-5, to be honest. And then I went back and looked at what I picked. Well, so the Eagles line, on the show, I picked it at 3.5.
Yes.
It actually closed at 4.5, and they won by 4. So I actually bet on that line separately and got barbecued. But at the time of our picks, I had it down as 3.5. So that line did shift throughout the week. I think Antonio Gibson being out for the Washington football team probably moved it. That line actually moved from 3.5 to 4.5 when I bet it on Saturday. And then it moved to 6.5, I think is what it closed at. So technically, in my head, I thought I was 0-5, but I did get that one because at the time of our picks, they did cover 3.5, winning 20-16. I didn't realize how many Lions would be injured. Lions +7 against the Seahawks. Seahawks winning 51-29. This is the one that didn't make any sense. Another line that moved. I had it at 3.5. Rams over Ravens. That moved all the way to 6.5, and I still felt good about the Rams covering. And you know what? They had the 6th best passing offense in the league, number 1 pass receiver in the league, Cooper Kupp, against the worst secondary in the league. And it still didn't matter. The Ravens covered anyways. The Rams needing a late touchdown to win 2019. So they won but didn't cover. Then I went with the red-hot Cowboys against the ice-cold Cardinals, 5.5-point spread. Cardinals winning by 3. That didn't work out well. And then Warriors -7.5 over the Nuggets. The Warriors losing 89-86. Warriors were not my favorite team. Yesterday, I had a $10 parlay that paid out the $475. I didn't actually have enough money to bet the other game separate because a lot of times I bet the other game separate, and I just put the parlay in itself. I did bet the Steelers separate and won, but I had the Steelers -2.5. I had the Mavs -3. They won, I can't remember, by 10 or 15. I had the Jazz -10. They won by 11. And then I had one other NBA game. Oh, the Grizzlies +6.5 against the Nets. They actually won by like 15 or something. So I hit the first 5 legs. Last leg, I needed Warriors -11. They're playing against a shorthanded team. The Miami Heat called up like 4 guys from the G League. They only had like 9 players or something. And the Warriors were up like 10 early in the game. And somehow the Heat hung around. It was an 11-point game with a minute and a half to go. And the Warriors went ice cold in the last minute and a half. Didn't get the cover. Stephen Curry was like 3 for 17 in the game. He was like 1 of 10 from 3.
Whoa.
So like if Steph Curry like even played remotely like Steph Curry does, that was quite a parlay. So the Warriors are not on my good side at the moment, guys. Not cool. That game against the Nuggets, by the way, the Warriors had like their worst shooting game of the season. They were down like 20 at halftime, came back to tie the game late, and then lost the game. So, anywho, 1-4 week. I'll read off Drew's picks, then I'll let you go. So this is, if you're listening, Drew is the pick master. So if you want to throw some mortgages, done.
not mortgages.
This is what you should mortgage. If you want to bet your whole house, Tom, this is where you need to go.
I do not, but go ahead.
Broncos +10 against the Chiefs, according to Drew Brackett. Eagles +7 against the Cowboys. Bears, Vikings under 44.5. Ravens -5.5 against the Steelers. And Rams -4.5 against the 49ers. So that's what Drew's rolling with.
All right. Well, it doesn't give me great pleasure to go against Drew on a pick here, and I'm going against him on an almost pick, but I did not. I marked that down as what would have been the 6th pick that I have here. But I'm going to go opposite of him on Chiefs and Broncos. I'm going to have the Chiefs covering the spread of 10 points. They're going to be highly motivated to put the pressure on the Tennessee Titans the next day. So I definitely see Chiefs on Saturday winning that one by a lot of points, especially with Drew Lock at quarterback. Not a particularly strong passer. Mizzou made, but not great in the pros. But most of the picks I'm sticking with teams that are playing for something. Most of them. Give me the Chargers -3 against the Raiders. Give me the Titans -10.5. I'm assuming Chiefs are going to win, so Titans are going to go out there and take care of business.
Who are they playing again?
They are playing against Jacksonville. No, Colts are playing Jacksonville. They're playing the Texans then? They're playing somebody really not good. Where is it? Yes, the Texans. So give me Titans minus 10.5 against Houston. Cardinals and Seahawks, I'll take the over on that game, over 48 points. Seahawks look great against Detroit. I'm not completely sold on Arizona's defense. Kyler Murray's going to have to put up points for the Cardinals to try to win the division, so they're playing for something. And I think Seahawks are playing for pride, Pete Carroll's job, and also let's just mess with a division rival. And then for the last pick, I'm actually going to go with Drew on this one. Okay. Bears Vikings under 44.5. We have don't know who the quarterback for the Bears is going to be. Maybe it's an injured Justin Fields, maybe Andy Dalton, and then Sean Mannion, whoever that is. Foles,
who knows?
For the Vikings, I just see this being a game where it's two teams where both coaches know that they're probably going to be fired at the end of the season, and I think a lot of these guys, they're going to be playing because they're professionals, but neither of them really playing for anything other than draft position, which isn't even their purview. So give me the under on that one. I'm going to be hoping for a good old black and blue, low-scoring game.
Isn't the Bears' first-round pick going to the Giants, I believe, too?
It is.
Okay, there you go.
I'm not mad about that one. I'd rather have Justin Fields, but yeah. So Chiefs minus 10, Chargers minus 3, Titans minus 10.5, over 48, Cardinals Seahawks under 44.5. For Bears Vikings. And then the one that missed the cut was the Rams one. Actually, for that, I have it on Bovada as -4, so we can give Drew a half point on that one.
All right, well, if Drew is taking a half point, I'm going to take a half point the other way.
Okay.
Because I've got, but I'll get to that in a second. I'll tease it because I'll start with college football. So we do
I figured you would.
3 NFL picks, and then we can do 2 others, whatever it is we want. I'm rolling with the national title game. I'm going Alabama +3 versus Georgia. 7 straight wins for Alabama over Georgia. Nick Saban is 4-0 against Kirby Smart. Alabama won the SEC title game by 17 points. The last time these two teams played, which was like 2 weeks ago? Maybe it was a little bit longer, but it wasn't that long ago. Maybe a month ago, removed from the national title game. And the difference is, we talked about it early in the show, Bryce Young at quarterback is significantly better than Stetson Bennett. Even without John Mechie, I think Georgia doesn't have the ability to keep up with Alabama. It's a passing league. It's a passing offense. Whoever passes better has a better shot to win. I think Alabama's going to not only cover the 3 points, I think they win outright. So maybe throw some money on the line and then throw some money on the money line as well to get you.
Plus 245, right?
Plus something like that. That's some good value. I don't know if it was that high, but either way, I would definitely put money on
plus
it.
120. I was looking at a different one.
Plus 120, yeah. Then I also like over 52 points in this game. 41-24 last time out, 65 points, well over 52. It's all about points. I think good offense beats good defense in the modern game. I expect Alabama putting up points. Georgia will put up some points to keep up to. I don't think it's going to be 41-24, but I look at something like a 31-28 maybe, 28-27, 27, actually 27-24 would be one short. Maybe 28-24 gets you at least an even, but I like over 52 points in that game. Then I'm sticking with teams who have something to play for as well. I like the 49ers plus 4.5 at the Rams. Not sure what happens with Jimmy G, Trey Lance, who's going to start, but I said it earlier, 49ers have won 5 straight over the Rams, including 31-10 earlier this year. Not really sure who wins the game outright. Really, it's a 50-50 game, but those 4.5 points give me some comfort, at least for the Niners to cover 4.5. And then I'm rolling with Colts minus 15 at the Jaguars. The Colts had a chance to get a playoff spot last week, messed around and got a loss. I don't think they're going to be messing around in this game. Jaguars coming off a 50-10 loss against the Patriots. It was actually 50-3, I think. They got a late touchdown when it didn't matter. I think the Colts are going to dominate this game. They need a win to make the playoffs. If they lose, they likely miss out on the playoffs. They could still get in depending on results, but nonetheless, a win assures them a playoff spot. I think they're going to win this game, and they're going to win it big. And then I like Washington minus 6.5 at the Giants. The Giants are really bad. They're really banged up. They've had all sorts of different quarterbacks who are really, really bad. Mike Glennon was the latest one to go out there. didn't work out well for them. You look at the last 4 weeks, they've lost by 11, 16, 15, 24, and the worst one yet, 26 to the awful Bears. So I think they should lose by 7 or more. Washington gets a division win there and covers.
All right. Well, we'll hope for let's see, most of our show picks don't overlap. I know Drew and I are going head to head on one of those. So fingers crossed it'll turn out all right for us and we can have a 14-1 week. That would definitely be nice. Trivia, I believe, is up next. I don't have anything for this segment. So if you do, fire away.
Yep. I've got one trivia question, nice and simple. What receiver holds the record for most receiving yards in their first 2 seasons of an NFL career?
I know Randy Moss is for touchdowns. Is he also for yards? Is it Moss? Is it the obvious answer?
It's not Randy Moss.
Maybe Randy Justin Jefferson?
Justin Jefferson. Very nice, Tom.
Another Minnesota Viking.
Justin Jefferson has 2,909 receiving yards through his first 2 seasons. And in case you're wondering, I know he doesn't even need the extra game. He already has the record. He has it by over 100 yards, I believe. He could get to 3,000 receiving yards in his first 2 seasons. He's second in the league in receiving yards right now. He was 4th last year. The dude is putting up unprecedented numbers. And it's crazy if you think about it, because he's doing it with another good receiver on his team in Adam Thielen. And he's doing it on a team with a really good running back in Dalvin Cook. And he's doing it with the quarterback who is good. Kirk Cousins, maybe a little underrated, but certainly not like a top 5 quarterback in the game. So you put all those things together. I mean, this man is probably the best receiver in the game right now. I know his college teammate Jamar Chase has something to say. I know Cooper Kupp is having the individual best season right now. But if we're looking at pure talent and we're looking at forecasting what we've seen the last 2 years, because he does have the most yards if you combine the last 2 years, I believe. And if you're looking at projecting going forward, 3-4 years down the road, I mean, I know Devontae Adams is in that discussion. Sure. Certainly, I think he's 3rd in yards this year, so he's not far behind. Cooper Kupp, obviously putting up great numbers, is in that discussion. But Justin Jefferson could make a case for being top receiver in the game, and I think he can actually possibly retire with the most receiving yards in NFL history, given that he's going to have that extra game. It's a modern passing yards game, and he started really quick in his career. And think about this. Stephon Diggs was not the clear number 1 in Minnesota. If anything, he was number 2 to Adam Thielen. Granted, they were pretty close. So for him to actually be clearly number 1 over Adam Thielen, when you had Stephon Diggs, who led the league in receiving yards last year, that shows you how good this man is, Jay Jetta's Justin Jefferson. So I do want to ask you, though, whose record did he break? And it's not Randy Moss. This may take you a little time, because I actually thought you would get this right, but I don't know that you're going to get the guy's record that he broke. Who previously held the record? And he's shattering this record, by the way, by a good margin. Like, he actually broke it last week, I think, or the week before. Like, it wasn't this week. It was like 2 or 3 weeks ago that he broke the record. With a few games
has to be somebody like relatively modern era, so maybe like a Reggie Wayne.
It's an active player. I'll give you that quick clue.
Player. Ooh.
Active player.
Is it Michael Thomas?
Not Michael Thomas.
He started out really hot as well. Not Stephon Diggs.
It's a guy who is sort of making a comeback, I would say. Really talented receiver. Really talented.
DeAndre Hopkins.
He's the opposite of making a comeback. He's hurt. Currently plays in the NFL this season.
Oh, gosh. I'm having such a hard time thinking about NFL receivers right now.
He is not the number one option on this team anymore. But I think he's doing well. He's doing well in a new situation. Let me put it that way. There are several clues I can give you right now that would definitely give it away.
Give it away, right.
I'm trying to think of, there's 2 clues that come off the top of my head that would give it away.
Conference?
So I'm trying not to give them.
Is the AFC or NFC right now?
NFC conference. I'll give you that one.
Okay.
And he did his damage as an NFC guy his first 2 seasons.
Okay, so not Antonio Brown.
Oh, what a knucklehead. Talk about that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give him attention, though, so we're not going to talk about it.
That's all I have to say about him.
Yeah.
Mike Evans, maybe?
No.
NFC South. Making a comeback. So it's not Devontae Adams because he's still at the peak. So that outs that clue. I'm drawing a blank on this one. Just give it to me.
All right, can I give you the obvious clues?
Okay, give me an obvious clue, yeah.
All right. He went from the NFC to the AFC, then back to the NFC.
No, that's not helping me.
That's not helping you?
No.
He changed teams this season. Mid-season changed teams.
Like in a trade?
It was not a trade, actually. It was not a trade.
So that means he got like
waivers, I believe.
Waivers.
Mm-hmm. He's kind of a little bit of a knucklehead himself. Big personality. There's 2 other clues. I'm trying to give you clues that don't completely give it away.
I mean, I'm doing so poorly on this. You might just have to.
Well, he did play. He did also play on the same college team that Justin Jefferson played, but before Jefferson, obviously.
Oh wow, Odell Beckham Jr.
Odell Beckham Jr. Indeed.
Wow. I just kind of forgot.
Isn't he on your fantasy team?
Yeah.
He's done well. Yeah, he's getting touchdowns again.
He did well enough for me, you know. He patched me through.
Well, I mean, he's what? Who's your top receiver?
I mean, boom or bust, it's Jamar Chase, but my top guy coming into the season was scary Terry McLaurin.
And he's done really well, too.
He hasn't done anything good for me since, like, October.
All right,
he ghosted me hard.
I'll tell you this. He is definitely doing a good job, Odell Beckham Jr., in his time with the Rams. He had, I believe, no touchdown catches when he was on the Browns. 5 touchdowns. In how many games did he play?
Not that many.
All right, I'm looking at this right now. He played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games with the Rams, and he had 5 touchdown catches. So, I mean, if you take out his first week with them, where he was really bad, granted it was his first game with the team.
Right.
And then he had a really bad game against Seattle where he didn't do squat. But otherwise, his other 5 games, 5 catches, 39 yards and a touchdown, 4 catches, 37 yards and a touchdown, 6 catches, 77 and a touchdown. This one wasn't too great, 2 for 28 and a touchdown, but still a touchdown. 5 catches, 81 yards and a touchdown. He's done fairly well for himself. I mean, he's done well enough where that move was worth it for the Rams. They obviously have Cooper Kupp, who is the number 1 for them. And actually, they made that trade right before they had an injury to, was it Jefferson? Who got hurt?
Robert Woods.
Robert Woods got hurt. Jefferson's the other receiver. So it ended up being a good trade for the Rams. So yeah, Odell Beckham Jr., number 1 all time in receiving yards the first 2 seasons. Justin Jefferson already passed them up this year. So Jefferson's doing big things. By the way, Jefferson had 4 touchdown catches in the national semifinal against Oklahoma. The anniversary of that was, I think, last week, and I saw it on Twitter, and it was like Joe Burrow, 7 touchdown passes, 8 total touchdowns, 4 touchdown catches for Justin Jefferson in that game.
Wasn't even close.
Not even fair. Not even fair.
Salutes and statements of the week. So as far as salutes go, I know we already talked about Mike Tomlin. That was one of them. The other salute I have is for your, as of right now, by 2 games, first place in the East, Chicago
The
Bulls,
Bulls.
sitting atop the East with a 25-10 record. Looking pretty decent. I mean, I know like with COVID, players are being shuffled in and out all the time. It's kind of hard to have a true gauge on how good these teams are, regular season into postseason. Eventually, I mean, it's going to take an absolute catastrophe for the Chicago Bulls to not make the postseason at the rate that they're going. But they've certainly looked really, really good. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do throughout the rest of this season. And then, of course, come playoff time, how much noise they can make, certainly outpacing expectations, although we all know it's about the 7-game series and not the 82-game season when it comes to the NBA. So just a quick shout out to the Chicago Bulls. Considerably more fun than they've been in like literally a decade, maybe a touch more.
Yeah, I actually think this is probably the most talented team they've had since Michael Jordan. I know they had the #1 overall seed with Derrick Rose. I know they were a little bit different because they relied on defense, Luol Deng, Tom Thibodeau. But I think like at least offensively, talent-wise, this is their best core of players they've had in terms of talking 3 deep. Derrick Rose was probably better, although the way DeMar's playing right now, who knows? But Rose is probably better than DeMar and LaVine, but you've got DeMar, LaVine, and Vucevic. So, like, you've got 3 legitimate players. I believe LaVine and DeRozan are the top-scoring duo in the league, and LaVine, DeRozan, and Vucevic are the top-scoring trio in the league. My statement of the week is along the lines of what you're saying right now. I would say that I don't know if I can quite pick him just because Kevin Durant at 29.7 points per game is doing incredible things. Steph Curry and Giannis maybe a little bit ahead of him, but I would throw DeMar DeRozan as a top 5 MVP candidate at least. I think he is first team All-Pro this season. I guess, what do they technically say? Like, do they say he's a 2-guard and LaVine's a 2-guard? Or do they label one as a small forward? Like, that's what's a little confusing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because I think he's probably the best shooting guard in the league. I mean, obviously, LeBron, Durant, and Giannis, like, you can say, he might be the 4th best small forward if you classify him small forward. But then he still might be, 8th best player in the league. It just happens that there's so many good small forwards. But I think right now he has to definitely be in the MVP consideration, especially if you take a look for what MVP stands for. It does stand for most valuable player, not necessarily best player. He is obviously, without question, top 10 best player in the league right now. I mean, he's 5th in the league in scoring, and he's doing it efficiently, shooting well from 2, well from 3, well from the free throw line. I mean, he's 49.4, 36.2, 85.8% from the floor, 5 rebounds, close to 5 assists a game. Guy's only getting 2 turnovers a game. So he's doing it efficiently, which is something that I like. But I believe, is he 1st or 2nd in 4th quarter scoring? It's like him and LaVine, I think, are 1-2. I think that
he's incredible.
I think DeRozan might be 1. And part of being MVP is valuable to your team when it matters most. He hit back-to-back buzzer-beating 3-pointers, and they said he couldn't shoot a 3. Back-to-back buzzer-beating 3-pointers, hit a 3 the last game of 2021 to win the game at the buzzer, then a 3 the first game of 2022. And both of those games, Tom, the Bulls were down 3 or down 1 or 2. So if he misses, they lose. He makes it, they win. And that's what I call a true buzzer beater. Because it's different when the game is tied and you hit a buzzer beater. If you miss, worst case scenario, you're going to overtime. They were losing those games. He put them up, won the game for them. An absolute animal late in the game. DeMar DeRozan, legitimate MVP candidate for me. Top 5 player in the league. And that's something the Bulls have been missing. Zach LaVine has been getting better and better, and he's doing well in the clutch too. But DeMar DeRozan is a true scorer. Like, LaVine is also a scorer. He's gotten much better at his moves, but he still does some damage in transition. Derrick Rose obviously was a scorer, but he relied a lot on his athleticism. And once he got hurt, he got hurt. And if anything, like, calm down. Don't take this too seriously because he's not as explosive and he's not as good. So this is not a comparison I'm making, but he is like more like what Jordan was, a guy who can create his own shot. He's got the mid-range game. He's got the fadeaways. He's crafty near the hole. I mean, he is a true scorer in the NBA, and it's something the Bulls haven't had since Jordan. I know Levine and Rose are borderline scorer, and they are good, but they still rely a little bit more on athleticism. Not to say that DeMar doesn't have athleticism either, but he is a true scorer, and that has provided the Bulls so much value, and he's a guy who's done it in the NBA. Like, Levine is on the verge of being a star, but he's still at that stage where it's like, prove it consistently. DeMar is a proven star, and they haven't had a proven star. Rose was becoming a star, and he was a star. He won MVP, but they brought in a veteran guy who's done it for years and is actually playing the best ball of his career. And I saw something on Twitter, and I wrote a ha, 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 ha quote tweet. Some ESPN analyst said that the Bulls weren't even going to make the playoffs. They're wasting their time getting DeMar DeRozan and Vucevic, guys who are over 30 past their prime. It's a team that wouldn't play any defense. It was going to be too crowded, blah, blah, blah. Like, you were just bashing the Bulls, bringing in DeMar. And that was actually a move that wasn't, like, unanimously as popular as it should be. I liked the move. I think you liked the move. And maybe Bulls fans did, but across the NBA, it wasn't, like, considered a splash move by any means. And people forget how good DeMar DeRozan was with the Raptors. And he had a co-star with Kyle Lowry there as well. So DeMar's the man. He's an MVP candidate, and I'm happy with what he's doing, and I'm happy with what the Bulls are doing. And I'll tell you this. The Bulls have, at worst, the third best team in the East. At worst. Like, every team played their absolute best. The Bulls are the third in the East, very close behind Milwaukee and the Nets. And I think Milwaukee and the Nets have had injuries. Bulls have more depth. I think especially the Nets missing a star. You know, they haven't had Kyrie the whole season, quite frankly. Things could happen for the Bulls. We saw this happen for the Bucks last year. Someone gets sidelined with an injury. Things go right. The Bulls have a real shot to make the NBA Finals this year. That's certainly what I'll be cheering for.
Absolutely. I'm cheering for that as well. And to round out with a short little statement of the week on my end, hands down, you know, we've talked a lot about coaching in the show, but for me, hands down, Mike Rabel is the NFL Coach of the Year. You look at what he's done with Tennessee. We're coming into the season. You know, nobody said Tennessee is going to be the number one seed in the AFC. I mean, like, on our show, we were saying the Titans are going to win the AFC South because somebody has to win the AFC South. And look at what has happened. No Derrick Henry for about half the season. Julio Jones has been either injured or just straight up cooked at this point in his career.
AJ Brown was playing terrible up till late in the season.
AJ Brown partially playing terrible, but then also just not very healthy throughout the year. And then look at, you know, the career arc of Ryan Tannehill of being bad in Miami, going to Tennessee, being pretty good for a couple seasons, and then this year, mediocre, I would say, is probably the best description. He hasn't been super awful, but he also hasn't been the reason. So I actually, like, I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's like, how have the Titans actually won football games? I don't actually know the answer to that question. And, you know, for that reason, you know, Mike Rabel to me is a shoo-in as Coach of the Year. I mean, yeah, you have Matt LaFleur up in Green Bay, who has a better team record. He also has one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, you know, great receiver, plays in actually, honestly, a worse division, coaches in a worse division than the AFC South, who is potentially sending two teams to the playoffs. NFC North is only sending one. And, you know, just Rabel has been the perfect embodiment of, I don't care if I don't have top talent. My 53, or I guess it's technically 46, dressed for game day. My 46 are going to outplay your 46 on this day specifically. You know, stomping the Chiefs, I believe it was like 27-3, something like that earlier in the season. Beat the Ravens, beat the Bills, have overcome all sorts of odds to do so. So statement of the week for me is Mike Rabel absolutely should be NFL Coach of the Year. Couldn't
agree more. He came from Bill Belichick. He was a player for Bill Belichick. Nick Saban coached under Bill Belichick. Talk about a coaching tree that actually hasn't worked out with past assistants and players, but it's working out for him. And I just looked this up unofficially on ESPN. I believe I have the Bills at 17th in total offense and 15th in scoring offense. And they are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Hold on. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 12th in total defense. And 4, 5, actually 6th in scoring defense, which is crazy to think about because they were one of the lowest scoring defenses last year, which Mike Rabel is a linebacker, comes from a defensive background. So he's obviously doing things with the defense as well. I agree with that statement because they don't really have a great player other than Derrick Henry, and they've done great without Derrick Henry. You talked about that blowout win against the Chiefs where they won by 24. But you actually take that game out of the equation. I mean, they're 11-5, and they've got a plus 62 point differential. So they're doing it by winning close games. I mean, they're winning a lot of close games, and they're finding ways to do it. And actually, they had the blowout loss against the Cardinals. They got off to a 2-2 start to start the season, losing against the Jets, and they just keep responding. They responded with a 6-game winning streak. And then they go on a 2-game losing streak, and guess what? They're back now playing well down the stretch. I like what the Titans are doing. So I agree. Coach of the year, I have no problem with it. Matt LaFleur, by the way, is the coach who decided to not trust Aaron Rodgers with the game on the line and to trust his defense against Tom Brady. So, I know that was last year, but man, give the coach of the year to that guy. I don't think so. I'm giving coach of the year to Rabel. I agree with that. I mean, Bill Belichick, I think, has to be in the running as well. I think he's doing big things with the Patriots. And who is the Colts coach right now? Colts are looking good. Frank Reich, he's doing well as well. So I think Andy Reid is always up there, but obviously the Chiefs are technically doing worse than they've been doing in recent years. And then, I mean, don't forget about Cliff Kingsbury doing a great job with the Cardinals and Sean McVay with the Rams, other good guys. But I would go with Rabel. Agreed.
He's done the most with less, I think.
Agreed. All right. Well, hey, that'll do it for the show. Next week, like you said, Tom, going to be a big show. We'll be talking all about NFL Wildcard Weekend, recapping the College Football National Championship, and much more.
Looking forward to it.
Have a good one, Tom, and have a good one, everyone at home watching. We definitely enjoy doing this show, and we are back for the third year of doing the show, even though we've only done it for a year and a half. We've now hit 3 separate years, and then you tack on the 3 years we did it in college. That's 6 years for the show. So pretty cool stuff. All right, have a good one, Tom.
You too.